welcome to the conference on Indonesian foreign policy. We are about to start the last session of the day for the Middle Power Room with the session titled C3 Indonesian and the Global South. How do we position ourselves and what is our plan? Which will be conducted in English. Untuk para hadirin yang membutuhkan penerjemah, silakan mengambil alat penerjemah yang berada di sebelah kanan saya dan di dekat pintu masuk. Dan jangan lupa sebelum meninggalkan ruangan untuk kembalikan alat interpreter pada tempatnya. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat as we are about to start the session in a few minutes. If you need to reach the restroom or prayer room, as we are about to start the session, please refer to the signage available on the hall outside the room. Attendees, we request you not to leave the room during the session as this will disrupt the flow of the session. To start this session, our last session for this room, Indonesia and the Global South. How do we position ourselves and what is our game plan? I would like to invite the moderator for today for this session, Professor Angel Damayanti, PhD, Professor in the International Relations Study Program of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Kristen Indonesia, as the moderator to start the session. This one, yes. Thank you. The floor is yours, Prof. Angel.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I know her because she used to be my student. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Are you happy today? Oh, great. Are you excited with this session? Can I have your excitement by giving a big applause for you? Woo-wee. Thank you so much. So, yes, good afternoon, honorable ambassador from various nations, distinguished speakers, dedicated students, and all respected guests. It is with great pleasure that I assume the role of moderator for this particular session dedicated to the topic Indonesia and the Global South. How do we position ourselves and what is our game plan? And this session is supported by our university partner, University Muhammadiyah Professor Dr. Hamka, or UHAMKA. Can we give a big applause to our university partner, UHAMKA? Thank you so much. And today is special. Can I sit? Yes? Okay, great, thank you. So today is special. Why? As we gather here in celebration of a significant milestones, the 10th anniversary of the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, FPCI. Can we give also big applause to FPCI? This event not only marks a decade of dedicated service, but also underscores the vital contribution of FPCI that has made in shaping Indonesia's foreign policy discourse. So, again, I would let us take a moment to commend the founder, the chairman, the diligent members of FPCI management, along with the organizing committee of the Conference on Indonesian Foreign Policy for their steadfast commitment and remarkable efforts with big applause. Thank you so much, FPCI. So, this afternoon session promises to be engaging as we delve into the concept of Global South. Have you ever heard about Global South? Yes, no, so. Okay, so this will be a hard working for our panelists to explain about this Global South. So what does this term Global South truly encompass? Is it a collaborative effort aimed at balancing the dynamic with the global north in pursuit of a more equitable and fair global order? Or it represents an identity reflective the shared experiences of countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Oceania, nations that have historically faced colonization or exploitation by Western powers and continue to grapple with economic challenges in contrast to their global north counterparts. So we will understand about this from our speakers. So, how can this global South effectively contribute to the global economy, politics, and security in the context of prevailing influence of the global North? And moreover, what prospects lie ahead for the global South, given the diverse interests and agendas that characterize its nations? And as we know that India and Indonesia are two countries that have emerged as prominent advocates for the significant role of the global South in today's multipolar landscape. To delve deeper into this important dialogue, we are honored to hear from our esteemed panelists. Without further ado, I would like to invite our distinguished speakers to join me on the stage. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. First, Ambassador Sumadi Brotodiningrat. I think you are here, sir. And we also have Ambassador Dian Triansah Jani. Yeah. Okay, the third chair. And we also have Ambassador Sujan Chinoy. Yes, please. Before we engage in our discussion with our esteemed speakers, please allow me to share their brief biographies. Ambassador Sumadi Brotodiningrat is FPCI Senior Fellow. If you attend the session from very beginning in this morning, we can see his pictures quite a lot in the big screen. It means that he is very senior. He's a distinguished diplomat with long career in Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is the ambassador of Indonesia to the United States in 2002 to 2005, ambassador of Indonesia to Japan in 1998 to 2002, to the United Nations, WTO, and other international organizations in Geneva from 1991 to 1995. He also held key positions, including Director General of Foreign Economic Relations. He was graduate from University Gadjah Mada and l'Institut International d'Administration Publique. And he also received numerous honors, including, it's quite difficult actually to read this, the officiers, the L'Ordre de Leopold. Is it right? Is it true? I mean, it's quite difficult for me. From Belgium government, good officiers in the Order van Oranje Nassau, Netherlands. I know, but it's quite a lot. So can we give a big applause to Ambassador Sumadi Brotodiningrat. And thank you. Ambassador Dian Triansah Jani, or Ambassador Jani, also a senior Indonesian diplomat. He was just got retired this year, right? And I heard some joke about that. Okay, so he's the ambassador or a permanent representative of Indonesia to the United Nations in New York in 2016 to 2021, an ambassador of Indonesia to other international organizations, including the WTO and other international organizations in Geneva in 2009 and 2012. And now he is a professor. He's teaching in various universities, but he doesn't want to be a professor. I don't know why. You can ask him later on. Why? Actually, he is a professor. And he's teaching in various universities as well as senior advisor in several financial institution. We are so lucky to have Ambassador Jani in our session. Can we give him a big applause? And for sure, thank you. And for sure, we also have Ambassador Sujan Chinoy. He is a Director General of Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense and Analysis. He is a career diplomat for nearly 4 decades. Wow, quite a long journey. He's the ambassador of India to Mexico in 2012 to 2015, to Japan in 2015 to 2018. He's also a specialist on China, East Asia, and political security issues. And he headed boundary negotiation with China from 1996 to 2000. And he worked at the National Security Council Secretariat from 2008 to 2012. And he was the Think 20 chair for India's G20 presidency. Wow, it's quite a great job, sir. And he is the author of The World Upside Down, India Recalibrates Its Geopolitics and Global Tumult. India as a pole star. Can we give a big applause to Ambassador Sujan Chinoy? So now, we will have about 45 to 50 minutes discussion with our panelists, and afterward, I will give opportunities to all participants in this room for sure to raise up some questions to our remarkable speakers, about 15 to 20 minutes. Is it okay? Okay, yeah, fair enough, yeah? Oh, okay, great. So I would like to initiate the discussion with a very fundamental and basic and significant question that serves a cornerstone for our collective understanding. For three speakers, I would appreciate your insight on the terminology of Global South. What is, in your opinion, this Global South meaning? What does Global South, and how relevant is this Global South to our contemporary situation? So, Ambassador Sumadi, you will answer first, and then afterward, Ambassador Jani, and then Ambassador Sujan. Yes, please.
Selamat siang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. And I think the way the moderator is arranging this is really following what people always say, age before beauty. But thank you very much, and don't be impressed with all the curriculum vitae that she was reading, because we are moderated or chaired by a guardian angel.
Thank
She
you.
is a guardian angel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the questions. I think this is perhaps useful as an opening remark for this discussion, because perhaps for those of a certain age like me, they perhaps already forget what is actually the global, not global, but what is actually the South.
Yeah.
And for the young, they perhaps don't know yet what is the South at that time, before coming to Global South. So I will bring you back to history, the genesis or the origin of the Global South, not recounting the history, but just several points that is relevant to that.
Okay.
There are three elements which what's going to define the genesis of what we later on called the South.
Okay.
One is the one is related with decolonization process. Decolonization process, and at that time, people in reflecting on decolonizations, they at least identified two stages of decolonization. One is political liberation, and the second is economic emancipation. And why is it? Because this is, without this economic emancipation, this is as if decolonization is not completed. And what is this economic emancipation? In short, we can say is a reform of a colonial pattern of economic relations, whereby the colonies are the land that people are asked to cultivate things, farming things, and other natural resources, and these are brought to the colonizer, being processed, and come back to be sold in the colony with a, of course, value added, which is really burdening. All this is actually things that with the decolonization, it must be reformed. This is one. The second, if you think about this, you recall what happened in Bandung. And actually, India and Indonesia are the initiator of the Bandung Conference. And at that time, of course, it's only Asia and Africa who were still colonized, but not Latin America. Latin America has been liberated 100 years before. So, in joining this phenomenon, there is a famous Latin American economist by the name of Raul Prebisch, who invent the theory of center and periphery in the international economy, whereby the developed countries are the center and the countries, the developing countries, the newly colonized, and the Latin America who has been colonized before are included. So in that sense, the South comprised already Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The third is, of course, the concept which is made by the South Commission, all the experts from developing countries, in trying to conceive a new theory to overcome this problem that we are facing. I only mentioned two. One is term of trade, which create a difficulty in the relationship. Hence, when the international organizations adopted this theory, the first program was they called Integrated Program for Commodities. It's to correct the imbalance term of trade by then. Now, and the second is, of course, development, financial development. All these two are adopted by the then international organizations, while in the realm of trade, it was UNCTAD in Geneva who were in charge. At the financing for development, the program is entrusted to the UN in New York. They created what they called at the time 3 times the UN Development Decade. Okay? Now this is one. With that, these countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America organized themselves, and it started with 77 countries at that time. That's why the South organized themselves with the name, the Group of 77. And they are the ones who are entrusted, selected, or rotated, or whatever, by the organizations to negotiate on behalf of us after being consulted and so on. So, actually, this is what happened in the North-South dialogue. One more thing about the old days. I would like you to bear in mind that it was never the aspirations of the South to split the world economy into two. I have a quotation for them. It never. The idea to split the developed and developing country, no. The vision is there not because of making. So the idea is to remain in one world, connected to one another, but in a more fair and just, what you call it, approach. Now, this is, how many minutes I have already?
Actually, you will have
Okay,
just
2 more
one.
minutes.
Okay, 2 more minutes.
You know, they can, so the former South now is still the group of 77 way. But then, recently in the last, so many years, about 3, 4, 5, 10 years, we find, or the South finds, that this organization becoming less and less effective. Second, there are a lot of new issues in which it was not anticipated at that time. So, but this is a question that perhaps Pak Jani can answer later on. Instead of trying to make it more effective, there are movements outside these organizations who is trying to remedy the problem that they are facing. Now, last I would like to say that this currently what is happening now within the South is a parallel approach. One is the well-organized in the international organizations, negotiating formally in various committee or whatever. And the second is new initiatives. Working independently, sometimes only one shot, and other are perhaps several repeated, and so, but still it's not integrated into the organization. Now, the question, and I will stop here, is that what is that? This is what called Global South. What is then Global South? It is the both the formal South group of 77 plus the new initiative together, working separately, independently, or perhaps later on the new initiative will take over the organizations. We don't know yet.
Okay.
Or the third is that we just disbanded it and create a new organization. No one knows. I will stop here first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Sumadi. So, Ambassador, thank you. Ambassador Sumadi has raised the Global South from the very beginning, the historical, from how the process of decolonization, the Bandung spirit, the Group 77, and until now, and see, he doesn't really, have a comment about what is the future of Global South. So now, we come to Ambassador Jani. Perhaps he can answer what will happen with this Global South. Is it still relevant with the current situation or what? Please, Ambassador Jani.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good afternoon. We're with all these young colleagues, and I feel very young. And as a good diplomat and a good host, usually we defer the floor to my ambassador Sujan to take the floor first. Then I will follow after that. He is more senior than I am, if I'm not mistaken. So I think you could have the floor first. Me? Okay. Well, actually, Ambassador Sumadi raised a very important prelude to what I'm trying to say. Let me be frank, Bu Angel. As an economist, as well as a student of international relations, I find it very difficult to have a definition of the Global South nowadays.
Yeah.
You cannot have a definition.
Yeah.
That's why I find it quite interesting when there are lots of pundits, intellectuals, think tanks referring to the global south. If you're talking about the global south, then you need to have a global north. And what the heck is a global north? So I'm very blunt. That's a good thing, colleagues, of being retired. I can say whatever I want. Now, although there are lots of my colleagues from Kemlu here and they cannot say whatever they want, right? Now, the way I look at the world nowadays, after the G20, after the G77, after the non-aligned, there are non-aligned countries that are aligned to certain alliances. There are those that are leaning toward the certain part of the north. So there are G77 that are questionable as the G77. They are much more developed than others. So I look at it, I simply try to characterize it in such a very simple type of an approach. If I'm going to ask what is global south, then I would say that, look, if you're talking about developing countries, then you have different types of developing countries. Those that has economic prowess, meaning they have the economic might, they have the economic capabilities, and they're being invited to all these groupings, whether it's a G20 type of grouping, whether it's a BRIC type of a grouping, whether it's MICTA and others. Those that have security and political capabilities. With all due respect, those that have nuclear power developing countries, they are a different type, they're a different breed of developing countries. And there's another category again, those that have IT, industrial capabilities, very well advanced in terms of producing and research and technology. To name a few, there are those that are in Asia, there are those that are, they're able to be, they are more developed than even some developed countries. So, in other words, you have another category. And there's another grouping that I would say is that those that are very active in regional politics. They become the regional leaders in some way or another. I'm not going to name those countries. I think you know in Middle East there are always the lead. There are those that are in certain parts of the, what shall I call it, the Tantan countries there. You have a certain leadership also in several groupings in Latin America as well as others. And then there are those other category which is quite interesting also. Aside from being a regional leaders, and there are those that are still dependent on major powers, whether it's a patronage type of system, whether it's a supporting, whether it's financial contribution type of a thing. Alliances is still there. So they cannot be a non-aligned, even though they're a member of the non-aligned.
Okay.
I'm very blunt, and I see my African colleague are nodding, and I think he knows what I'm trying to say. But the most sad thing of all this story about the global south is that there are those that are left behind, not members, not having this categorized of economic prowess or political or security, not belonging to any type of grouping. I think this is the thing that we, as Indonesia, that has always been championing the Bandung spirit, the non-aligned spirit, should have a look on. So when you categorize all this, then you need to be able to maneuver or navigate. In the old days, Bung Hatta navigate between Karang, what is Karang Pak? Coral reef, rock, between two rocks in the old days. Now the question, if I'm a policy maker, I would have to navigate between all these groupings. And I have to also navigate with all the global north also, which is quite interesting. Who are the global north? The Scandinavian, the European, or is it the North American? So there are all this category. I give the following what Pak Sumadi mentioned. Even in the old days, you have the G77 and China. Yes. So where is the China? And when we negotiate not as G77, we negotiate as G77 and China. And if you ask the question, correct me if I'm wrong, Ambassador, China always considered themselves as a developing country. But is China a developing country? So how do we look at this spectrum? So the relevance of the whole analysis is trying to find out where we can play the game. How can we make sure that, of course, Indonesia has always championed the needs and the interests of developing countries. Yeah. We will always become developing countries, even though we're in the grouping of G20, and hopefully, inshallah, if everything goes well, we will be one of the 10 largest economies in the world. So that's where we have to look at it in such a way. So I don't know whether I answer your question, but at least I give a platform for discussion. I see lots of these young colleagues are trying to question me. So I leave it at that, and being young, we don't like to talk a lot, We just go to Instagram. So with that, I give back the floor to Ambassador Sujan.
Okay, so I think all the participants should try to understand what is Global South then, because it's kind of like a very huge, diverse, huge spectrum, many categorized on this Global South. So perhaps we can get a bit more clue from Ambassador Sujan. What is Global South and how it becomes relevant? Perhaps you can give more definition, more definite definition. Okay, please.
Well, thank you, moderator. A very good afternoon to all our participants. Let me begin by thanking the FPCI and particularly Ambassador Dino Jalal for inviting me to participate in this very wonderful conference. I'm so glad to see so many young people here. As far as definitions are concerned, let me begin by pointing out that, as you all know, the Global South was a term first used around 1969. And the world then was one in which the categorization of the Global South generally tended to refer to earlier definitions like, for example, the Third World, which was a category used quite pejoratively during the Cold War, or for that matter, developing countries, which is something that was associated with a very large cohort of countries that had emerged from the shackles of colonialism, that had newly emancipated political systems and were trying to find their own place in the international order. But beginning the 1970s onwards, particularly with the opening up of China in Asia, we began to see a process that had begun, in fact, with the rise of Japan from the ashes of the Second World War, the rise of Korea as a manufacturing nation, and this relay was continued by China particularly. And we saw that the engines of economic growth shifted from traditional areas like North America and West Europe towards Asia. And China was a kind of spectacular, sort of effect on this theory. But later we have also seen in this century that growth and progress in the so-called Global South is not limited only to China. It in fact has shown considerable progress in countries like Indonesia and India and many others in our part of the world. So the short point here is that the Global South is a dynamic concept. It's evolving. It's very hard to define, as previous speakers have said. And let me very quickly point out that there was an attempt once by Willy Brandt, for example, the Chancellor of West Germany, to divide the world according to the rich and the poor. And that line is called the Willy Brandt line. It simply is a geographical line that divided the world into the northern half, and that was the rich, and the southern half, that was the poorer. That particular line is also full of contradictions and anomalies. For example, Albania is supposed to be in the European part, but as you all know, it would much rather be classified as a poorer country of the Global South. And in the so-called Willy Brandt list of countries that were the South, you also had immensely rich countries like Qatar, UAE, Japan. And so that is a non-starter. So how do you begin to define the Global South is the real question today. Now the Global South, I think in my view, has received fresh impetus as a concept because of the financial crises that we have seen, including in Asia. For example, we saw the Asian financial crisis, which between 1997 and 1999 laid waste many countries, including in Southeast Asia, which led to a certain change and new dependencies were created through the Chiang Mai initiative, currency swap agreements, etc. And if that were not enough, we also saw the two global financial and economic crises of 2007 and 8 lay waste to a very large number of countries. It created new potential members for the Global South. So that's the short point. It's evolving, it's dynamic. You could at any point of time have countries that are otherwise regarded as rich, but facing grave difficulties that might want to be defined as the global south. May I just mention here very quickly that there are other organizations that typically kind of framed the global south. One is obviously, as was referred, the NAM, the non-aligned movement. But remember that unlike the global south, the non-aligned movement was essentially a politically neutral ideological movement that tended to stay away from the machinations of the Cold War and the contradictions. And it had a membership. It had, in fact, a secretariat also, which is not the case with the global south. You also have the G77, which is actually now a grouping of 134 countries plus China, and it has a secretariat which is located in the United Nations, and that secretariat is funded, in fact, by the member states. In the NAM, it is the chairperson or chairman of the NAM that funds the secretariat, but both of them have a secretariat, both of them have membership. The Global South has neither. So we are in a situation where these definitions don't come very easily. And may I end by making one small point. It's very hard to define great powers also. It's not just a problem defining the global south. What is a great power? If it is membership of the United Nations Security Council, well, that's the council that's not working. There's nothing great about it today. It's completely dysfunctional. It is fractious. It is holding up peace and progress everywhere. It's not able to address the great challenges over time. So great powers don't come because you have nuclear weapons, because there are many powers outside the UN Security Council, like mine, that have nuclear weapons. So that's not the definition. And so middle powers also are very hard to define. You know, there's a huge spectrum out there. What is a middle power? You know, is it GDP? I was taking a look at GDP. If it's absolute GDP, do you know what the list of the permanent membership of the UN Security Council should look like? It should, of course, have the United States of America, a very rich country, but it's going to have Ireland, Qatar, UAE, and maybe Luxembourg also. That's your list of the UN Security Council if you go by GDP per capita GDP.
Okay.
So it's very hard to define the global south.
I know. So it's becoming, harder to define what is global south. But at least we have some clue here. The decolonization process, the G77, and then, it's a dynamic process. So perhaps until now, we are still looking for the global south itself. Could be a collaboration, organization, or could be loose than that. Okay, so since Ambassador Sujan, you have also mentioned about China and about the future of global south. Now, we can come to my first round question actually. But I'm sorry, I think due to time constraints, perhaps we can only have one question each because it's already almost 16. So yeah, I try to manage the time here. So you participant will have the opportunity to raise question. So Ambassador Sujan, what is your predictions for the future of global south with the dynamics process, with the evolving process? Especially considering the rise of economic and geopolitical powers like China and India, since you are an expertise of China and China relationship with India. So could you please explain about this?
So I'm going to sound like a disruptor here, contrarian, questioning kind of line. I personally don't believe that any permanent member of the UN Security Council has any moral right to be part of the global south. Because you cannot run with the hares and hunt with the hounds, frankly, as we say in English. So by what yardstick would you have any country that's in a privileged position in the UN Security Council sitting in the global south? That's like, I'm sorry to say this bluntly, it's like putting the fox in charge of the chicken coop, as we say in English. So minus the privileged powers of the UN Security Council, I think you have to see what kind of definition or membership fits the global south. Now, it has no permanent membership, it has no permanent secretariat, and personally, I don't advocate one, because you already have a plethora of, organizations which are running parallel. Some have outlived some of their kind of, vigor, like the NAM is now seen as slowing down. The G77 sputters along. You now have the G20 that's come up as a more representative format, which has all the major groupings in it, including some of us that consider ourselves, India and Indonesia, among others, to be members of the Global South. It has, for example, the permanent members of the UN Security Council. It has the G7. It has the original BRICS country. It has IPSA in it. And therefore, I think the G20 is a place where we should all be actually focusing our energies. It has the right mix of what you call the rich and the not so rich, and the ability for each one of us to play a bigger role without any one country having a veto power. So permanent membership of a Global South is not advocated. After all, no one wants to remain in the Global South forever, do we? No. We all want to graduate out of it.
Indeed.
So keep it aspirational.
Yes.
Why do you want to put a permanent label of Global South with all its pejorative, implications on a large number of countries? Essentially, you're trying to say that, look, you are all relatively poor countries, and a membership of that you pay for is like saying, I pay to be permanently, the also-ran type of country. So I don't believe in that, and I think nobody wants leaders either today. Let me tell you very frankly. It's a much flatter world. Why is it flat? It is flat because the international order as we know it, represented by the UN Security Council, is actually dysfunctional. There is something called strategic autonomy that's available to all powers today, big or small. Even the smallest of powers are exercising their own strategic autonomy and thumbing their nose at larger powers. We've seen that. We've seen it in political terms, we've seen it in military terms as well. It's in economic terms that there is still a new kind of neo-colonialism which is shaping up. And if you're not careful about that, as we've seen at COP 29 also, this total inability of the rich to acknowledge that climate finance requires a lot more to be done by the rich countries, that kind of attitude, if it's also further going to be seen in what we call the age of digital public infrastructure, artificial intelligence and data also moving into the hands permanently of the rich, you will have neo-colonialism also in terms of information technology, in terms of data. So we have to worry about that. But short of that, there is strategic autonomy today that everyone has. It's a flatter world. And in a flatter world, I think, without looking for permanent labels like Global South, it is countries like India and Indonesia that should seek to do good by their own regions. Not necessarily as leaders, but as partners, working at the comfort level of their neighbors, including in the extended neighborhood, perhaps even setting up what you call Global South cells in their own government. This is my suggestion to you today for consideration, that let's not look for a permanent secretariat. Let's look to set up Global South Center within the governments, and these centers, if set up in a number of what we call so-called middle powers, like Indonesia, India, and some others, they could be talking to each other in the future, a conversation between them. They should pay for their own activities. They should try and do as much as possible for their regions without, as I said, trying to take a leadership role, which is generally not welcome in any part of the world today. In fact, we know of some examples where countries try to be leaders and then there is a pushback. There's a pushback against debt trap diplomacy. There is a pushback against what you call environmentally unviable projects, degradation of the environment. When the conversation and the decision making is run from some other capital, it usually meets with a lot of resistance in the region over time.
Okay, excellent. So it is quite interesting to understand, to note that Ambassador Sujan mentioned about, Indonesia, India, and some other countries, not include China, since he's the permanent member of UN Security Council, become partners, more on the partnership pattern. So I will go to Ambassador Sumadi. So with this, dynamic, let's say the loose pattern about Global South, all the various spectrum, what is the core advocacy of this Global South? And amid the Global South's effort to create a more multipolar world order like Ambassador Sujan has mentioned, how can these countries like Indonesia, India, and some other that categorized as Global South balance out the economic development with the core advocacy of Global South? How can we understand about this, please?
Thank you very much. Let me start by reminding all of us that Indonesia, since the very beginning, is always, I shouldn't say leaded, but at least committed to the South and then the Global South also. We were once largest contributor of the South Center during my time in Geneva, and I don't know why he stopped the contribution of Indonesia in the South Center in Geneva, because perhaps like others, not only us, are rather disappointed with the performance, more and more ineffective performance of the South Center. Now, the second question is how to do this.
Yes.
I would like to say again first that in the last, how many years, 50 years, it doesn't mean that those are in vain, those are a waste. No. I will tell you the result, which is some up to now still being recognized as a principle. One is the principle of different levels of development, which created become a principle of special and differential treatment. Up to now, we are negotiating with the North, with developed countries. This is still applied. Then there is again a principle which is called CDR, common but differentiated responsibility. This is also a result of the struggle, negotiating struggle of us at that time. And of course, in New York, in UN Development Decade, the limit of the target of ODA of 0.7%, which is still actually become a target, even though there are only several developed countries can fulfill. This is also a result of the long struggle of the South at that time. So it was not a waste, but now things change. One is already mentioned now. What is called development now is competing with survival. Development, how do we choose? We develop or we survive.
Wow.
And so far, we haven't yet find the right way, because one of the most important, which has now become a link between linkage between the problems, are one, of course, financing. Financing of development. The second is, of course, technology. As long as technology is still something that we have to pay a lot, this will be very difficult to reconcile between the development side and the financing side and the development side.
I see.
So for the time being, I think it's enough. We wait for the question
For the questions from the participant. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sumadi. So I'm going to Ambassador Jani, since you are the economist. Under the new leadership now, Indonesia is expected to fully leverage its role within the Global South. especially given its consistent economic growth around 5% in recent years, right? But with the global economic uncertainties and Indonesia's need for, let's say, export diversification or the food self-sufficiency and many other issues in Indonesia itself. So do you think, how can President Prabowo position Indonesia as a regional and global leader, particularly in this context of a global south? Could you please, as an economist, of course, you know about our economy, right? So do you think the new leadership will bring Indonesia to become the leader, or like Ambassador Sumadi mentioned, survival first?
Well, thank you for giving me the very fun question as compared to those that on my right and left. And to put it on record also, it's very hard for me to speak when I have my mentor, my teacher on my right. But before answering that question, I beg to differ with Ambassador Sujan when he mentioned that it's better to graduate from the South. If I have a choice, the North is always cold, the South is always warmer. I'd rather be in the South than in the North, to be frank. Now, coming to the question, I think we should look at our comparative advantage as a country. First, our comparative advantage is we're a large country, like it or not. And sometimes when I teach in the university, I ask a very simple question to my Indonesian student or my American student when I teach in Columbia, in NYU, how big is Indonesia? Not many people knows how big Indonesia is. I simply put it in a map. If you put it in a map, Indonesia is as large as from Florida to Seattle. If you don't believe me, look at your Google map and you find out. It's as big as from Scotland until Turkey, 44 European countries. That's how large and how big Indonesia is. That is our comparative advantage. Our comparative advantage is also, we have always been principled in our position. We have always been committed on international law and international rules. We are members of almost every organization, whether regional, international, we're accepted everywhere. We're not a Muslim country. We're the large Muslim population, but we are the creator of the OIC. We are a member of ASEAN, definitely the founder. We created the ARF, ASEAN Regional Forum. We link ASEAN with the Middle East, with AMEF. We link ASEAN with Europe, with the ASEM. We link ASEAN with the Pacific Basin, which is APEC. And we're also a member of many organizations, whether it's a MICTA, G20, and others. So we are well situated in playing a leading role. But I agree with Ambassador Sujan, there's no leaders. But the main thing is that you have to have a proper mix and balance, mixing between the need to grow, but also taking into account the environmental, climate change, sustainable approach, mixing between the interests of the global and the national interest in the sense. So it's a very simply proper balance type of things. So for instance, when we try to grow, coming up with what your question on Prabowo, where he should go, we still have to principle in trying to preserve the international norm. WTO rules, we have to make sure that it's there. But of course, there are other interests that we can play. For instance, when we're talking about critical minerals, we're talking about food self-sufficiency. Unless the rule says differently, so be it. Now the question is, can we create negotiators as many as possible that are able to play the game? I don't know how many people here are lawyers or liars for that instance. I'm sorry, pardon the pun there. But I'm making it quite clear. We need more lawyers that are really knowing the WTO rules. We need more economists, financiers that knows the IMF World Bank rules. And that is what is lacking in developing countries, except maybe some developing countries like India, others that have the expertise, they're knowledgeable to be able to negotiate. And that's why I come to my last point is that there are another category of developing countries or global south, which is the category of those countries that are theme or issues oriented. A simple case, climate change. There are grouping that is called SIDS, Small Island Developing States. They are ganging together, collaborating, working to address these issues because, once again, if you in Indonesia, if I ask an Indonesian, how many islands do we have? If they can answer that simple question, I will say hallelujah, alhamdulillah. You cannot find out, because if you ask the Ministry of Fishery, they will say 17,884. You ask the Navy, it's different. And it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Simply that if there's a tide going up, we lost 100 islands, and then if it goes down, then we have another one. So my question is, if I'm asked to come up with the policies on how to build Indonesia's positioning vis-a-vis international, first we have to play with the global norm and rules. Because once we disrupt all the agreements, all the international rules, whether it's in UFNCC, whether it's in line with WIPO or WTO rules, everything will be in chaos. And if there's trade wars, to be frank, we will be surviving Indonesia because we have all the natural resources, we have the expertise, we have the growth, we have everything. But what happened with other developing countries? And we have a moral obligation, like Pak Sumadi says. It's in our constitution, it's in our blood. We started with the Asia-Africa Conference, we started by creating the non-line. We need to keep on fostering collaboration between the developing world. I don't want to define it as a global south, but we need to work together. At the end of the day, we're in the same world, like it or not. Sorry, I'm very sentimental and philosophical on this, but I really believe as a negotiator, unless we work together, the world will go to ruin.
Wow, excellent. Can we give big applause to our 3 remarkable speakers? So actually, there are still like 20 minutes, so maybe I will go to the second round, but please answer the question in a very short answer because we only like 2 or 3 minutes, and then afterward we can go to our participant. Okay, so just the second round question to Ambassador Sujan. You mentioned about cooperation, about partnership, and now can we explore about the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This become a crucial platform for economic and political collaboration among the global South. So, how can this global South utilize multilateralism through BRICS, for example, to maintain the regional and global stability without getting entangled with the power dynamics of major players like the United States and China? You mentioned about partnership, right? So how we can do this in 2 or 3 minutes?
Oh, one
please.
word, just one word, impossible.
Oh my goodness, impossible. So then,
And you know why?
yeah, why?
Because as I told you, it's very difficult to prevent the BRICS, and we must all prevent it from getting to being an anti-West platform. That's the last thing the BRICS wants to do. If it becomes an anti-West platform, if it is run on an agenda that leads to that direction, it's a non-starter. The global South and its cause, its priorities will be lost in any case.
Okay.
To start with, there is a contradiction because you already have 2 permanent members of the Security Council that are currently engaged in confrontation with the West. Ideological, political, economic, military, that could potentially be guiding it in a particular direction, where if it takes on an anti-West hue, it's not going to serve the purpose of the large majority of others, many of whom, like us, consider ourselves to be part of the global South.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sujan. Although it's quite like a bit, very competitive situation in this current. Yes, we have to. Yeah. So I come back to Ambassador Sumadi. With this situation, like just Ambassador Sujan has mentioned, that it's kind of like impossible to have this unilateral cooperation without, kind of like have a competition with the Western part. So how then Indonesia's agency and game plan to establish its position among other global South without, lose its, let's say, collaboration or partnership with the global North or the Western part? What do you think about this? How to balance this position?
We get used to it long time.
Wow.
We face reality that the interests of the South
Yes.
are different.
Yeah.
Ambassador Daniel mentioned between the small island countries and the producer of petroleum
Yes.
is totally different. There are so many other examples for that. Huh? because of this difference of interest, genuine, we usually choose which big thing that we can struggle, we can fight together.
Okay.
And not yet.
Okay.
And just leave the particular interests each country or a group of unilateral doing its thing. Regionally, you know, we are among the at the forefront of our negotiation with the West when it comes in the UN on this very basic things of principle like financing for development. But in ASEAN, we created a network of institutions, economic included, that is, and we invite our partners from developed countries also. And of course, bilaterally, of course, we are cooperating with our friend from South, but we have the IGGI at that time, which is a cooperation with the North. We do it as long as we don't make harm to our friends. So let us see what is now the current situation, what issues we are facing, which issues we can work together as a principle, and what that we better to leave it at the discretion of each country based, depending on their own interests.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sumadi. Yes, we can give big applause to Ambassador Sumadi. Now I come back to Ambassador Jani, talking about BRICS, the multilateral cooperation. So, as an economist and as a professor as well, what would be the threat of if Indonesia prioritize joining BRICS, because Pak Prabowo has mentioned about this, right? And then over joining OECD, which one is more a benefit for Indonesia, joining BRICS or OECD, or both, or none of them? What do you think?
As a diplomat, my answer will be, there's no privatizing. Because we join lots of regional organizations. The beauty of Indonesia is we are able to join any grouping.
Exactly.
You see?
Yeah.
Because our positioning has always been right in the first place, in the start of our history as a non-aligned countries.
Okay.
We are a trusted partners, we are credible. That's why we can be an honest broker. We are able to mediate. I'll give a simple example. We are the only countries during the eve of this Ukraine war, but Jokowi are able to go to Ukraine and Russia back to back.
Yeah.
The only leaders. Can you imagine? Why? Because we're trusted. We're trusted in trying to bridge a lot of conflicts in lots of parts of the world.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a choice, actually. For me, I would look at it, if we join OECD, the beauty of joining OECD is not becoming a grouping or not that we're aligning with any developed countries per se.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is by joining OECD, we have to force ourselves to make sure our regulation, our law, are in line with the the universal standard, the high standard of the OECD. And this will lead to further investment. This will lead to be able to produce, to be able to export. We become more competitive than others. By joining BRICS, we are saying, I agree with the Ambassador Sujan here, it's not with the intention of trying to alienate the West.
Yeah.
And we're trusted by the West, by the way.
Yeah.
Maybe other countries, if joining BRICS, would be looked at differently. But for Indonesia, we're the good guys. I must be frank in saying this. I think you should clap when you say I say this.
Okay. So Ambassador Jenny.
Yes, I'm saying you're the good guys also, but we're better. Sorry about that. I have a joke.
Okay, so Ambassador Jenny answered the question as a diplomat. Indonesia is a good guy as an economist. Okay. So now we still have 10 minutes from our discussion. We still have 10 minutes for our participant who has any question. Wow, there is another. Okay, but we only have 10 minutes actually. So perhaps I can only give two participants to give question, very short and concise. So yeah, I think, okay, first from that, the guy with that. And I'm sorry because our partner from Africa here already raised up his hand. Can we give our opportunity to our African partner? Okay, so is there any mic organizer, please, committee? Or you can loud voice so everybody can hear? No. Let them. Now you become the organizer as well, Ambassador Jenny. Okay. Mention your name and very concise question, please.
Yes. Thank you very much for your opportunity for me to ask the questions. My name, may I introduce myself? My name is Weko Satya Guntoro. I'm from Indonesian Defense University, or Unhan.
Yeah.
My question for the first for Ambassador Gianni, Your Excellency. I consider that you mentioned a lot of issues about the global South cooperations. It historically began on the colonialist size era into the development country, and then in the recent time we face a lot of more such crucial issues such as economic challenges, climate change, and also not to mention border issue.
Yes.
But one of the most important things as in Indonesia, which is the opportunity and also the comparative advantage, is about the carbon trading.
Yes.
How you see the carbon trading in the future for Indonesia? Is it looks promising or is become a problem for Indonesia especially? And the second question is for Your Excellency Ambassador Sujan from India. Yes,
Okay.
I feel honored to ask a question for you. As we know, we in Indonesia or in the most southern part of the globe, this is a lot of more issue, especially about the border country issue. I see Indonesia and a few countries in the ASEAN is some have border dispute among them, especially in the southern China Sea.
Okay.
But I'm also noticed that in your country, in India, is also have the border issue also.
Yeah. Asai Chin, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And Indonesia took the initiative to do the joint statement between Indonesia and China. I don't know, it's look without the discussion or the determine other countries in the ASEAN. How do you think about this? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Just a second, we go to the second participant. Yes. Is there mic? Yeah. Thank you. Mention your name, please, and then the panelists that you want to address the question.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dauda Tule from Ghana.
Dauda.
Yeah, actually, it will be difficult directing a question to one person. What I want to actually say is that I'm happy being here because the issues that have been discussed here, I always think over it, and it will be like, am I the only person that thinks this way that people don't see? The issue is that why do we waste our time seeking for validation from people who will never validate you?
Wow. Why we look for validation? Validation from the people that doesn't want
The issue is that let's reflect a bit on our history of non-aligned movement and everything that has been discussed. Actually, my first president, Kwame Nkrumah, was one of the founding members of non-aligned movement.
Okay.
We were able to emulate each other to seek for decolonization. We were able to emulate each other to make sure we do not align with the major blocks that existed then. Why don't, in recent time, can we emulate to develop ourselves without emulating people who will never validate us?
Okay.
And it stems from how do we teach our people what is being taught about what do we describe global south to our students. That is where the problem comes from. You will see that there is a missing trend of the way we perceive ourselves.
Yeah.
We lose the focus on ourselves whilst we intend to focus on how people see us rather than what we see ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Wow, such a question. Why do we need validation from others, right? So, who will answer first?
All right, let me answer the first question on carbon trading. Let me make it clear. I was a negotiator for the UNFCCC in 1992 when I was a young diplomat. And I really believe when I negotiated in the old days until now, climate change is a necessity for us to work together. You can develop any kind of tools, whether it's carbon trading, whether it's your emission, whether you go to just energy transition. But the question is, how can we manage it? How can we ensure that we also get the bulk of the profit from the carbon trading? But to put it simply, climate change is an issue, is a necessity to be dealt with together. You can develop any kind of tool, you can develop any kind of way. Can I, before giving floor, I'll just go directly to my brother from Ghana. I completely agree with your statement. And that's what we have been championing in Indonesia since the old days. Because we have been championing on how to South-South collaboration. We have pushed for resilience. We have pushed to make sure that the South not become dependent on others. And until now, we continue. That's why when we negotiate the climate change, now we are changing our attitude also. We are not asking, but we are giving. Indonesia has changed dramatically in other ways. Mentalities do not rely on the West. You have to rely on your own turf, your own capability. And I can assure you, once Ghana has the highest growth in Africa, I know for sure you have around 9 to 10% growth compared to other African countries. But we also have to make sure that we are into good governance. We have to make sure that we're efficient, we're competitive, we're working together in addressing all these issues. Otherwise, we will be dependent. And Indonesia is one of those few countries that fought for our independence. We didn't get our independence. And that's why our motto has always been, look, we will survive without any help if necessary.
Excellent.
And that's what we're trying to do. Sorry, I'm very, once again, emotional when it comes to this thing.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador Jenny. Now, Ambassador Sujan, you want to answer the Indonesian Kai question?
Sure. So basically, countries like India, Indonesia, China, they are large countries in Asia. We have a great legacy, a civilizational legacy also, and it's incumbent on countries like India, Indonesia, and others to show the way forward. My Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has said on a number of occasions that now is not the time for war, that differences should be settled through peaceful dialogue and negotiations. And above all, we should take a human-centric approach to resolution of problems. So relations, whether between India and China, whether between Indonesia and China, these must be built on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and reciprocity. There is no space at all for any kind of neo-colonial attitudes. There is no space here for unilateralism or what you call military coercion. This is not acceptable. We have to together build not just a world that is multipolar, but also an Asia that is multipolar. You cannot have a world that is multipolar and an Asia that is unipolar. What's good for the goose is equally good for the gander, as we say in English. And as for you, sir, the short answer is that you're right. We should not seek the validation of others, including the North. What we have to do as the Global South is to formulate our own unique identity, one that actually puts values above all else, one that puts what you call a shared humanity above all others. So values-based future for humanity is what the Global South is capable of doing, despite not having the same amount of resources as the developed North. We can actually point a new moral path to the world, because the world is in dire need of a new fulcrum. That fulcrum is not going to come from mercantilism, from a new digital or AI colonialism. It's going to come from basically a values-based future. And I think we are all capable of doing that.
Okay, thank you so much. from Ambassador Sumadi, but I'm sorry, we have very limited time, so 1 or 2 minutes. Yes, please.
Just just very shortly on this validation business. It will depend, as I told before. Now we are still in the what is called global north, global south, is still in the process of evolving, and we don't know as yet what will happen. But in the end, we will determine ourselves what we intend to have. If we intend to have something as a common aspiration of struggle, basic principle among ourselves, I don't think that we need validation. But if our aim to have a rule which will govern all the, not only the South, but all the, countries in the world, so that we can get something out of this rule, then whether you like it or not, you need a validation. For rule-based countries, for rule-based governance, you need a validation.
Wow, thank you so much. I know it's quite interesting to talk about Global South, and it seems like still a long journey about Global South and how it will evolve in the next journey. We don't know yet. So, but because of the time limited, so I have to conclude this session, and I would like to extend my gratitude to the distinguished panelists who joined us this afternoon. And please join me to give big applause to Ambassador Sumadi Brotodiningrat, Ambassador Dian Priyansah Jani, and Ambassador Sujan Chinoy. And let us also show our appreciation to all the participants for your valuable contribution to our discussion. Please give big applause to all of us here. And finally, let us take a moment to express our thanks to God Almighty for His blessings which have guided this event from start to finish, enabling it to proceed smoothly. I'm Angel Damayanti, and I respectfully conclude this session. Thank you so much.
Please don't forget to thank our guardian angel, the moderator, please.
Thank you so much. And the photo session, I give it to
Thank
our
you to our
MC.
panelists for such an engaging and insightful session. Before the session ends, I would like to invite all the panelists to stand in front of the stage. We're going to have a photo session together with the speakers and also the moderator. And please stand in front of the stage. And as a token of appreciation from Dr. Dino Patijalal and also FVCI, we'll also provide souvenirs to all panelists. We sincerely thank you for your contribution and participation in CIFP 2024. For photographer, please be ready. On a count on 3. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Thank you once again to our distinguished panelists. For everyone, and ladies and gentlemen, you can now proceed to the main hall or the Citizen Diplomacy Hall, because we're going to have the closing ceremony where we have a celebration for the 10th year anniversary of FVCI.